Hey there, and thanks for joining us for this episode. And as we get started, I wanted to remind you to make sure that you subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you may be listening to podcast. This podcast is sponsored by ServeHQ.church. ServeHQ is a place where you can train your volunteers and leaders online through effective video courses. And really, that's just the beginning. You've probably dealt with that frustration of trying to coordinate meeting times for training, trying to organize materials for helping people learn how to, whatever it may be, do some type of volunteer work or procedure at your church. And it quite honestly can just be really frustrating. Well, ServeHQ simplifies all of that by, again, putting it all online, allowing people to watch it and learn how to do ministry at your church at their pace. You can learn more and start using ServeHQ at www.servehq.church. That's www.servehq.church. Thanks to ServeHQ for sponsoring this episode. Well, now I look forward to presenting the main content of today's episode as we continue to advance a reformation of fellowship, partnership, and gospel hope right here on the Church Advance podcast.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Church Advance podcast. This is Brian Sams, and I'm here with my friend Scott Magdalene. Scott, good to have you today on the podcast, man. Welcome.
Man, it's good to be talking to you today, Brian.
Yeah, and for those of you that are making this connection here, many of you have gone to Scott's ministry website, ServeHQ. Scott is a partner in ministry here at the Church Advance podcast. And so before we get into today, why don't you just greet our audience, tell them yourself a little bit about ServeHQ since you are the man behind the message.
Yeah, so I started ServeHQ about 10 years ago when I was an administrative pastor, and I needed to be able to train, revamp a lot of the volunteer training at my church for a bunch of people that were spread out across the city, the whole city of Jacksonville. So I'm a Jacksonville native guy. And it was a difficult time getting them all together at the same time. And so I ended up with a lot of piecemeal training of volunteers. And that's a really common thing that a lot of ministry leaders face. And so with a technology background, I was like, I can build something. I like to build tools. I'm a tools guy. So I like to build tools to solve problems. And so I built a simple little online thing to solve the problem of doing some remote training with some accountability, some level of checking. Did they actually understand the training? And then it turned into something else. Like, so other ministry leaders liked it. I showed it to some friends in ministry. They liked it. They wanted a version of it. So I rebuilt it again and rolled it out for other churches. And it kind of has grown from there ever since 2015.
Yeah, so we appreciate you providing those services, and thank you for being a sponsor and a partner of this podcast. And check them out, servehq.church. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
.com.
Yeah.
I thought I
Yeah.
got it right. Yeah, and of course, it's in the show notes, and you guys see this from time to time. Pray and hope you will check out Scott's work there. It's profound, and a lot of great ministries use it, and it can really help you train up your workforce. So Scott, we were talking just the other day, and in addition to your work in the technology space, you are a called pastor. You've
Mhm.
been in associate type roles for some time, and are kind of leaning in, planning, moving towards senior pastor leadership, either in planting or some role like that in the near future.
Mhm.
And so we started talking about preaching, and we started talking about what I'm going on, and it ended up saying, "Hey, let's talk about this on a podcast." So let me real quick introduce something really new. Just hit. We've talked a little bit about it here and there, but of course, I found a Church Advance. I've also now found a Pulpit Advance. Pulpit Advance is a online community conversation cohorts and coaching classes related to preaching. And the idea behind all that I'm trying to accomplish is to really just help people preach better. It's a real simple idea. And I believe that a lot of guys, young in ministry, maybe they never had teaching, they've just never had experience. But I've never met anybody, Scott, that didn't just say, "Yeah, man, I'd like to preach better." No,
Right.
I mean, I don't know who would say, "I don't want to preach better."
Yeah.
And so what I've done is created a program. You can go to pulpitadvance.com and check out the challenges that are more 5-day focus, short burst of trying to tackle a particular issue. We've got cohorts that are coming up where you can jump into an 8-week class together with about 10 guys. And then there's some other offerings that we have, a subscription that's coming online soon, some other ways that I can help you try to shape up your sermons. And in talking, Scott, you and I were talking about us working with you a little bit. And I was like, hey, let's just talk about this some. So,
Yeah.
so as a preacher that is looking to be in a teaching role soon, and looking to be the best you can be in that role, um, we decided for you to kind of interview me a little bit, asking me some
Yeah.
questions related to some things that were on your mind. So that's what this is about. This is about sharpening up a tool to get ready to be used in ministry. So that's what we're going to talk about, man. So why don't you get us started with some thoughts you have heading in toward preaching and some of the goals you have and some of the questions you have for me.
Yeah. So I've known for a little while that you're a good preacher, and you're looked to, like, other preachers look at you and kind of look up to you as a preacher. I'll say it like that. And then I found out that you're actually a professor of preaching. So it's not just that you have this magic, the Holy Spirit gift, and also like a magic ability. Like, you actually are a student of the skill of preaching,
Mm.
like the discipline of preaching, and which means that you have an ability not just to do it, but also to help others do it better as well. I was like, well, as an aspiring preacher myself, I've preached a decent amount over the last 20 years, but never in a really consistent way enough to establish my own style, establish a rhythm, get into habits and um, methods that are consistent, and developing a preaching flow. And so, as I'm stepping into regular preaching here and moving in toward pastoral ministry, I'm an interim pastor right now. Um, I've realized that I need a lot of help. And
Mm.
so when you're talking about what you're doing with Pulpit Advance and where you want it to go, I was like, well, can I please be a guinea pig, and I'll publicly express all the things I don't know, if you would publicly please teach me some of the things. So you agreed to it, and so we're here talking about it. And I've got a bunch of questions, and I'm going to start off with some basics, and we're going to kind of, what my plan is to move to some specific ones that I have personal challenges with. So we'll
Mhm.
start off something very basic. My first initial question is, how do you choose what to preach?
Yeah. That's the initial question of all preachers in all settings is, what am I going to preach? Whether you are in a series, you're choosing the series, you're within the series, choosing the parameters for each individual sermon. And then of course, if you're a guest speaking or you're not speaking consistently,
Mhm.
you've got the issue of, okay, my pastor asked me to preach.
Yeah.
What do I preach? So I want to start with the simpler and go to the more complex. The simpler question: if let's just say you're out there and you're not the senior pastor yet, and you're invited to preach, okay, okay, on this one time, once every month, some kind of setting like that. If I'm doing it regular but not no, regular but not every week, so meaning I'm preaching once a month, let's say for my pastor on Sunday night or something like that, or Wednesday or Sunday morning, I'm probably going to do a series so that I can stay in series.
Yeah.
If I'm doing so that'll lead me. I'm going to pin that up for a minute and kind of set that aside, because that would lead me to how to determine what series to go into and then what to do inside a series. But then just on the opportunity that I have to maybe like speak at a church, which I get to do a lot, I would say the first and foremost thing is, number one is, I'm always in prayer. I know that sounds really simple, but I do certainly want to pray about the situation, about the moment, considering the circumstance, considering the audience, considering the occasion, the setting of the preaching is going to determine. So, for instance, what if I get asked to preach on Sunday morning um, and to a church that is established and mixed with all kinds of people, ages, and so on and so forth? That's going to look different, right, than me getting an opportunity to preach at a nursing home, or me preaching at the youth group, or me preaching at a Christian school. So I want to obviously be praying, but also want to shape the moment for the audience. So
Mhm.
so that's important. As it relates to what to preach in series, so I step back and go, okay, if I'm just starting, that's going to be different than me in the middle of something 10 years in. So let's say I'm just starting my first series. Okay. I'm committed to preaching expositional sermons in sequence. So currently I'm preaching through the book of Genesis. My advice to anybody would be that that would be your method. You know, preach through books, or preach through a character series, or some guys might preach through topics or whatever, but try to be consistent in a series that will allow you to plan your preaching out a little bit, so that you're not caught each week trying to decide. So if I'm new preacher, first church, probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something that will allow me to establish consistent vision for the church. Probably for me, that's either going to be the book of John, to just really focus on Christ centered teaching and preaching the life of Christ. It also gives me the element, as we know, the churches that see the most people saved in any given year are church plants. They're the most high volume in terms of new people and such. So John's great. And then, of course, I would also consider Acts, as I'm basically establishing parameters and direction, if you will, for the church. Then from there, I'm going to offer variety. Length of book is going to matter. Old Testament, New Testament is going to matter. Genre is going to matter. And then things like um, type is going to matter. Meaning, is this a heavy book like the book of Malachi, or is this a inspiring book like the book of Ruth? So I want to maybe offset to provide balance. And so that's kind of how I would approach selecting and determining what to preach that way.
All right. And so you've selected what you want to preach on, or where you want to preach from. I guess would you say that's probably a better way to put it? Like, where are you going to preach from, and then
That's right.
let
That's how
let the
I would approach it.
let the location in Scripture define what you're going to preach on.
Exactly.
All right, so that goes to my next question. You got what you're going to preach on, or where you're going to preach from. Your your sermon preparation flow. Before we get into each individual element, where do you start from, and then where do you build out to? So, in the past, I've tried it where I start from the beginning and try to develop it through to the end. That didn't work. Then I tried to realize, okay, maybe I should start with the body and what am I going to preach, and then kind of work on elements, and then work on some other pieces. That has worked a little bit. I haven't established exactly like the order of how I develop exactly my sermons. And I've found that from week to week, I need a flow. I need a consistent flow.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
what would you say is yours as a seasoned preacher? And is that what you would recommend to a newer, not necessarily younger, we're not all young, but a newer a newer guy to preaching? So like,
Yeah,
would you
I
recommend
love
this is how I do it, after 30 years of preaching, and you should do it too? Or for a newer preacher, a little bit, here's a modified way.
Oh, absolutely. So here's the cool thing. The first time I was asked to teach homiletics, I literally had to stop, because I knew I was going to teach at a college, but I didn't know homiletics was in the cards. So in all reality, I had never thought about my process. I had never
Huh.
thought about, what do I do? I mean, what do I really do? If I'm gonna teach somebody else, I got to know the way, go the way, and show the way. So I really sat back and developed. It's really a 12-step process that's divided into 3 sequential pieces. So every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are my busiest sermon prep days. Okay. Usually by Wednesday or Thursday morning at the latest, my sermon is, for all practical purposes, done. And the way that is able to happen is because I have a clear process that is repeated every week. And yes, I recommend all levels use this process, because if you're going to start and you're going to start well, you might as well start right. So let me give you the three categories, and then I'll fill them in a little bit. Number one is what we call preliminary steps. This is including things like reading the text, praying over the text, brainstorming the text, and then drawing in what I would call cross references to the text. And all those are preliminary. This is me stepping in, literally opening up my Bible Monday morning, and I start reading the text repeatedly with emphasis, sometimes 10, 15 times. So I'm of course, excuse me, let me back up. I pray first. I'm going to pray about the text. I'm going to pray for understanding of the text. I'm going to pray for submission to the text. I'm going to pray for just for insight into it. Like I want to pray that God will give me the insight that I need to communicate the message. So prayer, then reading. While I start reading, and I mean, I'm talking about no books involved here, no commentaries, no books, just reading. As I'm reading, I am going to then begin a sermon notepad. And the sermon notepad is me basically brainstorming. This is when I'm writing down notes, and there's no bad idea, right? You can't have a bad idea. I might write down questions. Who's this person? Why is this said? Or who said this? Or the he in verse number 6. What? That's a pronoun. Who's that a pronoun to? What's this word mean? Like I'm preaching this weekend, the brook Jabbok, Jabbok. What does that mean? Where is that? Where is Esau when Jacob is going to meet Esau? I'm literally brainstorming stuff out. Maybe I'm capturing a little outline is forming, because if I've read something 10 times, I'm probably starting to see some structure in the text. So I call it sermon notepad, brainstorming. And then with all those ideas that I've gathered, I am going to start thinking about cross references. Oh, yeah, this is about prayer and this is about reconciliation. Let me think of some verses here. I might use a tool like Thompson Chain Reference Bible. And I'm collating now. Okay. That is all preliminary. Those are things that I'm doing before research takes place. Okay. So that leads me to the second step. And that step I just gave you all happens on Monday morning. The next step happens on Tuesday morning for me, and that's called investigative steps. Okay, so I'm taking my notepad that I just jotted all these thoughts down, all these questions, all these words I need to look up, and I'm going to now start working through the actual study of the passage. Okay, and that really involves three predominant ideas. Now I'm summarizing a little bit of my steps, but this is essentially it. I'm going to first study the context of the passage. This is going to be things like reference works, introductions, New Testament, Old Testament surveys, study Bibles that give you big pictures, big ideas, overviews. I want to know what's come into the text, what's going from the text, what's going around, where is this located, who wrote this, all those contextual things. Second thing I want to do is I want to study the content of the passage. That's words and grammar, basically. And then I want to study the commentaries related to the passage. And so that is where I'm going to start reading after all of my go-to commentaries. And it's all in that order, right? So that's like last in the study. And the whole goal of this investigative these investigative steps, is to lead me to the main idea and the telos, the big picture, the purpose of this sermon, okay? Because until I have that in my mind, I can't really construct the sermon because I don't yet know what the sermon is about. Scott, it's like this, trying to write a research paper without a thesis. Like, why am I writing all this stuff? I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Until I frame that up, which should come as a result of my study, I'm not ready to construct the sermon.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads me to the third stage. And the third stage is constructive, the constructive steps. So you got preliminary, investigative, constructive. And basically I'm doing three things here. I'm building the structure of the sermon. That's of course your outline. Then I'm writing the content of the sermon, explanations, illustrations, applications. And then I'm writing the introduction and conclusion of the sermon. And that is the basic overview of what I'm doing in a given week to prepare for the message.
Now, when you're talking about the that middle step, when you're collecting all of your information, reading all of the books and commentaries and studies, are you taking notes and writing, or is it more of a mental process of consumption and kind of internalizing it? Like when you're done with this section, like this piece of it, do you have like essentially like a little notebook of content that you're gonna that's what you're gonna work from to construct your sermon?
Exactly. So I'm taking it all down digital because I preach digitally. So I am like I just use Google Docs because it ultimately is what I ended up preaching from. But
Okay.
I put notes. I just tons of notes. Then as I begin to construct and organize, I might copy and paste notes. I may already know, hey, that's going to fit in this section. And I was showing my class the other day. Let me see if I got it right here. Nah, I don't. I was showing them how when I break a passage down into sections, it's like a circle. And I'm asking these steps. I'm sorry, I'm dividing this circle up into sections. So like, let me give you an example. My sermon this coming Sunday is on Genesis 32. And I'm talking about when Jacob has to face Esau. And the text breaks down really plainly verses 1 through 8, verses 9 through 12, and then verses 13 through 21. Okay, so as I'm studying, I know this stuff's going to fit in one of those silos. So I kind of start organizing it as best I can into those places as I'm formulating structure and outlines. And so, yeah, when I read maybe a sentence from a commentary and I'm like, oh, that's really good, I want to use that. Or I think of a cross reference or an illustration pops in my mind, I'm going to put that down in there. Yeah, I'm going to put that in that notepad, and then I'm going to work off that notepad in construction development.
Okay.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode. And I do want to remind you to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you may listen to podcasts. While you're there, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and then share the podcast with other pastors and leaders that you believe this content could be a help to. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we'd really appreciate it if you'd like this video, and then also share a comment with any thoughts, feedback, or questions you may have. We may just be able to answer those in a future episode. Well, I want to thank you again for joining us as we continue to advance a reformation of fellowship, partnership, and gospel hope amongst Bible-believing pastors and churches. And we'll see you next time right here on the Church Advance Podcast.